Let's take a closer look now at President Trump's inaugural address. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen is inside the Capitol Rotunda tonight.
At just over 16 minutes, it was the shortest inaugural address in 4 decades and the most blistering indictment of the powerful figures seated on the dais that any newly sworn president has ever delivered.
The establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little to celebrate for struggling families all across our land.
At times, the country's newest former president appeared to bristle at what he was hearing.
Bernie Sanders could have spoken those words. And he spoke those words with the entire establishment sitting there. This is a guy who overturned the two dynasties that created and built those establishments.
President Trump heralded the dawn of a new creed, a new vision, rooted in the unabashed nationalism of his reclaimed motto, America First.
Every decision on trade, on taxes, on immigration, on foreign affairs will be made to benefit American workers and American families. We must protect our borders from the ravages of other countries making our products, stealing our companies, and destroying our jobs.
It was shocking because it was just so different from the usual blah, blah, blah. It was absolutely, totally uncompromising. It was total Trump.
The new commander-in-chief exalted the funding of the U.S. military above the subsidization of foreign militaries, protection of U.S. borders over other countries' borders, and articulated a realist doctrine of American power.
It is the right of all nations to put their own interests first. We do not seek to impose our way of life on anyone, but rather to let it shine as an example.
This was Donald Trump seizing power. This was the speech of an insurgent, of the leader of a revolt that has won, has taken control in Washington, and he intends to push that agenda.
Some on the left found the address, with its reference to the American carnage of crime, drugs, and gangs in the inner cities, to be too dark a portrayal of urban America. Still others, demonstrating that extreme partisanship will be a hallmark of the Trump era too, branded the address Hitlerian. Brett.
James Rosen live on Capitol Hill. James, thank you.
In the meantime, we put out brand new Fox polling last evening showing President-elect Trump entering office with some low approval ratings. We find 42% of Americans with a favorable view, 55 unfavorable. So let's see where we are with the American people. Byron York is watching that. Chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner, and Fox News contributor. And Byron, good day to you. Based on that number, the next president has his work cut out for him. Go ahead and start there.
Well, we have seen a lot of polls, including this new Fox poll, that show Donald Trump with very high unpopular numbers, and people disapprove of the way he's handled himself during the transition. So that has led to a lot of stories. We've all seen them that say, Trump enters the White House the most unpopular president in history. But there's a couple of things to think about here. One, Trump has always polled unpopular, even as he was moving toward winning the Republican nomination and even as he was moving toward winning the general election. So he seems to be unpopular in a winning sort of way. And the other thing, the New York Times' Nate Cohn wrote about this morning. It could be that there's something about Trump's appeal to Americans that isn't really caught in the traditional polling questions, because at the same time a lot of these polls are showing Trump being unpopular, they're also showing majorities of Americans are optimistic about the next 4 years under Donald Trump. They think he's going to improve the economy. They think he's going to lead the country in the right direction. So on the one hand, you have these unpopular numbers, and on the other hand, you have these optimism numbers. And it could be that the optimism numbers are more important for Trump as he tries to get that agenda through Congress.
Well, let me show our viewers that, by the way, the former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and his wife Callista going into the Capitol building there a moment ago. You're going to see a parade of folks throughout the day. On that optimistic note, Byron, let me show our viewers what we found on the economy. 66% of those we surveyed are optimistic, and you compare that to January of last year and the January prior to that. If you take a deeper dive into that number, you find that is a majority among Republicans, among independents, and among Democrats. So what do you make of that as you analyze it?
Well, certainly Democrats and the Obama administration would say that the economy got a lot better under Barack Obama, and Donald Trump gets to inherit a better economy. And there's no doubt that Donald Trump is inheriting a much better economy than Barack Obama did in 2009. But we also see a lot of support. New Wall Street Journal poll out a couple of days ago asking what Americans think is the most important thing that Congress and the new president should do right now, not a year from now, not ever, but right now. And number one was keeping American jobs in the United States. That was, basically the platform of the Donald Trump campaign. And I think Trump comes into office with a lot of popular support for his main campaign agenda.
Thank you, Byron. Byron York with some analysis
Bill.
there leading off our coverage. You bet we'll talk again real soon as the images continue to flow across your screen here in Washington, D.C.
As Donald Trump goes in to get changed for the balls tonight, we are sort of left to ponder what kind of an administration this is going to be. And based on what we saw earlier today, we're getting an early idea that this is going to be one that shakes things up. Here are some moments from earlier.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
With 35 words, Donald Trump completed a journey most establishment politicians insisted would not, could not happen. Then he used the 1,433 words of his inaugural address to put those same politicians on notice. There is a new sheriff in town, and things are going to change.
We will no longer accept politicians who are all talk and no action, constantly complaining, but never doing anything about it. The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action.
It was vintage Trump, the same themes he repeated again and again at rallies and speeches across the nation for 17 months. But today, it wasn't rhetoric, it wasn't promises, it was policy.
Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning. Because today, we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another, or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
From the platform at the west front of the Capitol, Donald Trump moved inside the building, where he took his first official actions as president, signing the waiver to allow General James Mattis to run the Pentagon, and officially submitting the nominations for his cabinet secretaries.
This is for Rex. I assume he was approved today.
It's coming though, right, Chuck?
Trump was seeking parity from Democrats with what Republicans allowed President Obama on Inauguration Day 2009, when the Senate confirmed 7 of Obama's nominees. But today, Democrats allowed votes only on 2 nominees, Mattis and General John Kelly for Homeland Security. Trump also signed a proclamation for a National Day of Patriotism. Today's actions were mostly about process. The real meat of policy will come on Monday, when Trump is expected to begin signing executive orders dealing with issues like strong borders, Obamacare, ISIS, and environmental regulations. On the newly revamped WhiteHouse.gov website, Trump reiterates his call to kill the Obama Climate Action Plan, which Trump calls a burden to American energy development. At the traditional congressional lunch following the inauguration, Trump encountered his rival from the election campaign, Hillary Clinton, who had been sitting just 3 rows behind him during the swearing-in.
I was very honored, very honored, when I heard that President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton was coming today, and I think it's appropriate to say, and I'd like you to stand up. I'd like you to stand up.
After the lunch, which featured an almost all-American menu of lobster and shrimp, black Angus beef, chocolate souffle, cherry ice cream, and 3 different wines, the newly minted president and his first lady made their way to the steps of the east front of the Capitol for the traditional review of the troops. From there, it was off to the inaugural parade to the White House. Along the parade route, thousands of supporters who are pinning their hopes for the future on Trump. And in many places, other voters shouting their displeasure at Trump's election. Though along Pennsylvania Avenue, none of the violent protests that marred the celebration blocks away. 3 times, the president and first lady got out of the presidential limousine. The first time in front of Trump's pride and joy, his new signature Washington hotel. A reminder of just how unique this moment in American history really is. Already a long day for President Trump, and will be longer still. He's got 3 balls to go to tonight, including one that will salute members of the armed services and first responders. Brett?
John, thank you. Bringing our panel now, Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume, Laura Ingraham, editor of LifeZette, Juan Williams, columnist with The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Now, there was a lot of reaction to that inaugural address. Laura, we didn't hear from you today, but I do want to play this soundbite before I get to you. It was all over the board, but this was an interesting statement.
when he said today, America first, it was not just the racial, I should say racial, the Hitlerian background to it, but it was the message I kept thinking, what does Theresa May think of this morning when she picks up the papers and says, oh my God, what did he just say? He said America first. What happened to the special relationship? What if you're Putin? You're probably pounding the table saying, that's what I've been saying, Russia first.
Hitlerian.
Well, it doesn't take long for them to go to the most extreme negativity. The same guy who had his infamous thrill running up his leg when he saw Obama walk out for one of the first times. It doesn't surprise me that MSNBC, CNN, throughout the day I was able to see some of the coverage. A lot of focus on the negativity. Trump, laid waste to all the people who were sitting really behind him. The Bushes, the Obamas, the Clintons, and a lot of the Republicans. I walked past John Kasich, who was kind of gray-faced today. Marco Rubio was, waving to people. But all these people that he defeated over the last 18 months had to come and hear this new vision for the Republican Party and this new vision for governing. It makes a lot of people really
What is that in a nutshell? What is that vision?
I think it's an economic populism that is conservative, but it's not the conservatism of pure interventionism of George Bush. It is not the globalist vision that both Bush and Obama and Clinton all shared. And it's much more rooted, I think, in closer to my old boss, Ronald Reagan, than it is at all to the Bushes. That's why it was so surprising to so many in the establishment that he was able to win this thing. And today's speech was, James was right, it was total Trump. This was Trump from beginning to end. It was an indictment, but it was also very hopeful. We're protected by God. We have a vision for the future that is going to be vibrant and creating jobs for everyone, regardless of where you come from. I thought that part was very positive, but look, I was up there on that platform, and there are a lot of egos that were bruised, and a lot of people, were still seemingly in a little bit of a state of shock.
Charles.
Well, I think he did lay waste to the vision of John Kennedy and Ronald Reagan. When Trump excoriated the foreigners for draining us of our wealth, for being essentially free riders, for using us, exploiting us, the most striking thing about that is he made no distinction between friend and foe. When John Kennedy spoke, he said, we will support any friend, oppose any foe in the defense to assure the success of liberty. No mention of liberty, no mention of the free world, no distinction between friends and enemies. So when you are in Britain and you do hear this, and you hear this essential indictment of all the outside world, all the others, as being responsible for American decline, despair, economic problems, etc., then you've got to ask yourself, this is a new country. Now, you could say, you can make the argument for this, and say when we won the Cold War, we decided we're through carrying the world on our shoulder. This speech, I think, is 25 years late, and it's remarkable that we went a quarter of a century maintaining the burden, but this is a way of saying we're done.
Fred.
I would just say this about it. Because he has no prior record in public life or public office, we know less about this incoming president than any incoming president that I could think of. And I think we all have a long way to go before we can say we know what he's really about. You look at the things that he says that Charles has pointed out, that Laura has pointed out, and they certainly point in one direction. You look at his cabinet appointments, one after another, particularly in the area of foreign affairs, and they point in an entirely different direction. And you look at some of the rest of what he said. It is a complex picture. It is in some ways contradictory. We got a long way to go here, and I think it's foolish to climb out on any limbs that might be sawed off when he turns out, as he has done for a year or more now, to be very different than we have understood.
Juan, what about that analysis? Give him a chance.
I'm all for giving him a chance. I think most people are for giving him a chance, but what we saw today was the kind of campaign speech that was maybe, some people said, the speech at the convention was pretty dark. Today also had its dark moments, but I think he spoke directly and bluntly, and I think it was a threat, as we heard from Joe Trippi, not just to Democrats, but to the Republican establishment in this town, clearly saying that they are the ones who have been reaping the benefits and not the American people. That opens the door to real challenges to the Republicans who now dominate the majority of both the House and the Senate.
10 seconds.
The Republican establishment was defeated in many ways by Donald Trump, but now he has to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. It's not as simple as campaigning.